If you check out my video on the first drive, you'll see I was talking about putting in some of that CMS, complete maintenance services, diesel clean products. I put a bit of a cocktail in actually, so it's the decarbonizer, the clean power, and the something else, whatever the hell it is. So I'm just going to go to the servo now and fill up. And then we'll have 2 full tanks. We'll run through both of those full tanks. At the same time, what we can do too is a mileage check, because I really have no idea how far we can go on 2 full tanks or what the consumption is like. So we'll zero the trip meter, get a photo of the odometer at the same time, and see just how far we can go on a tank, or 2 tanks I should say. We're just going to reset the timing belt light. So you see where it says T-belt and there's a light. Just alongside that on the left of it is a tiny button. And if you press that in, that then resets it to 150,000 Ks. It's pretty simple on these. On later ones, it's a matter of turning on the key and holding in the trip meter, blah, 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 blah. Not so with this. So look, let me just grab a probe and I'll show you how it works. First of all, there's a tiny little hole here in the dash. Now normally that has a rubber bung in. You've got to pop out the rubber bung and then you've got to reach something in. This is actually a cooking or baking spike, you know, to check whether your meat or your cake is cooked. It works perfectly fine for this. Poke it into there, locate the little button and press. And it's as simple as that. Or at least we hope it is, because if it comes on sometime before 150,000, we won't necessarily know anyway, will we? But we did take a photo of that time, and we'll also put a sticker on the firewall. The other day I showed you how to reset the timing belt light, and that was completely successful, as you can see, because it's actually now come on. And I'm pretty sure I didn't do 150,000 Ks in the last whatever period. So there's obviously a bit of a process or a procedure that you've got to follow. Maybe the key needs to be turned on at the time. I don't know whether it's an electric shift or a mechanical shift, and I'd pressed it a couple of times and maybe that kind of reset it and then reset it again. I don't know. But we'll mess around with that until we get it right, and then we'll be able to tell other people how to go about it. But a couple of other things have happened. One is that, as you will have noticed, the windows are up, and while I am shouting a bit, it's nowhere near as bad as before, because I've got both windows up, and that is because the air conditioning fella came this morning and he regassed the system. He indicated that it was low on gas, and so I don't know when it was last done. I do know that when I picked it up a couple of years ago, it was cold, but obviously a little like, I suppose, tyres deflating over time, you know, with rubber hoses and seals and joints and stuff like that. The gas leaks out, but so it was low. But what he does is he evacuates the whole system. He then pumps it with air to basically dry it out in case there's moisture in the system. And then he regasses with fresh gas and then evaluates the system. So it's freezing cold coming out of these vents, so it's fantastic. He did indicate that the air conditioning compressor wasn't operating optimally, and also that there's kind of like a receiver dryer thing, and I'll show you that. And he indicated that would probably need replacing at some time too. Clearly the condenser, as in the radiator, was not an issue, as I suspected it might have been when we glued those fins back in. However, it's pretty old, and at some point it might be worth replacing everything. The condenser, the air conditioning compressor, that receiver dryer or whatever it's called, and also the evaporator, and that's the thing that's underneath the dash. Now there's probably a fair amount involved in that. In that it's probably a couple of $1,000, say, to do that, but you'll know at that point though that you've got a damn good air conditioning system that will last for 10 or 20 years. Though of course obviously they need gassing periodically, and he did indicate that air conditioning systems should be serviced every couple of years, but I doubt that anyone does that. They wait until they don't work before they contact him. And the other thing was that I picked up some plastic specific paint for the, I just saw a bloody electric bicycle, with the school kid on it, and I'm on 100 section at the moment. He would have been going at least 60 to 80, heading in the opposite direction, so hard to tell. But riding this electric bike, now I think that they're supposed to be limited to 25 kilometers an hour, and here he is on 100 section, roaring along at what has to be in excess of 60, probably closer to 80. Unbelievable. And of course these kids, they're youngsters, like young teens with no licenses, no registration on these bikes, and very little safety gear. He did have on a helmet, but I didn't notice, any leathers or anything like that. Naturally, of course, he's on a bicycle, for goodness sake. Anyway, I was in the middle of saying that I've got the paint for the grill now, and what we'll do is give the grill a good clean. I wiped off that other paint, but give it a good clean. And then what I thought that I might do with regard to the lettering was hand paint the lettering after I've sprayed the whole thing grey. And with that in mind, rather than get a can of paint, I bought a paint pen. Now I'm hoping that might be the solution to the problem. Anyway, look, we're going for a ride simply because, well, we can, and because with the air conditioning, this is a nice, cool ride now. I did mention that it's still noisy, but it's a Troopy for goodness sake, so what do you expect? But if you've been with me for a while, you will have seen that I did soundproofing on the other Troopy that I had, and I'll link you to a couple of short excerpts from that and show you the kind of thing that I might do. And that really involves pulling out the seats, pulling up the mat, at which time, you know, you can give the floor a good clean, check for rust issues or anything that might need a touch-up, and then put down soundproof matting, put the mats back, put the seat back, and you'll get a bit quieter. It's not going to get rid of the rattles, but it will just stop some of the resonance that you get in these great tin boxes that are the Troopcarrier.
Now you can see once again pressing it down into all of the corrugations just to make sure that it adheres. Now the distance between the two wheel tubs is about 80 centimetres. I think it is 1.2 or 1.4 from wall to wall, pretty well, of the Troopy. Now here you can see the extrusion. I had no way of knowing what's underneath that, so I basically soaked them in a rust converter and then painted them with a rust paint, Rust-Oleum or something, to give them some protection. Now you can see that I fitted the matting in the front. I've actually doubled it up here because a fair bit of noise comes through the transmission tunnel. It's important when you do this too to make sure that you leave the cutouts where the seats go, and in particular where the footrest goes, so that's that one just underneath.
Heading back home, and I just dropped into the Toyota dealer after we were talking a moment ago about that timing belt light reset, and I thought if they've got an old timer there on the staff, he'll remember these cars. And so I dropped in, and they didn't really know what to do, but one of them figured out that what you've got to do is remove the instrument cluster and change a couple of screws apparently. And I'll show you a diagram of what I'm talking about, but there's a screw in a hole that you take out and put in an adjoining hole, and that apparently resets it. Sounds a bit weird to me, but that's what they said they need to do. And they said they're happy to do it for me, which was very generous of them. So I went and sat in their waiting room while they pulled out the instrument cluster. Then they came back and said, maybe that's not it after all, but the button which I've shown you that you need to press in is supposed to stay in, and then in 150,000 kilometers from now it pops back out again. But something is stopping it staying in, or rather whatever was supposed to keep it in was missing or broken or something, and so it was popping straight back out and the light was coming on. I'm not certain that that's right, but that's what they said. But the light is still on, and very generous of them, I think, you know, to pull out the instrument cluster,
fiddle about with it, you know, and then put it all back together again, which they've done for no charge, which is bloody good service in my view. But of course it hasn't fixed the problem. So I think we're going to do a little more investigating on this. I actually think that it's not as complex as they believe, all of that switching over screws. And I did come across that on one of the sites that I looked at when I was investigating. But I think we'll still keep fiddling about with this. What he did do though was give me a sheet of paper with a dude's name on it who fiddles about with stuff like this, you know, in particular on older vehicles, but who fiddles about with instrument clusters and things. So once again, you know, I can't complain about the service that they gave me. I mean, nothing's really happened. The light was on when I went in there and it's still on now. But they spent a good half an hour pulling out the instrument cluster, investigating the whole thing, and then, like I said, giving me the name of this fella that I can go and see. So top marks to Toyota. They look after me even when I'm not a paying customer. The weather doesn't look the best again, but that's often the case, so we just deal with what it is that we've got. But if you have a look up here, it's pretty grey up there. Now, you'll recall on the back of the Troopy that we had a bunch of stuff, and there's not much left. Fuel filter, oil filter, and air filter, coolant and oil. Let's get a couple of jobs done. What we'll first do is let's have another look at that timing light. We'll just try pushing it in again and we'll see what happens. Meantime, we can be draining the water out of the radiator. We'll just dump it straight on the ground. It's just pure tap water, as you recall. I wouldn't just drop coolant on the ground. In fact, we actually captured the coolant last time around. It's in this bucket. But this time around it's just water, so let's just drop it and then we'll see if we can set the timing light while that's happening. Then we can put the bung back in, top it up with coolant, and we can also have a look at the fuel filter at the same time. We won't do the oil until we've warmed up the engine because it drains a lot faster and more completely if the engine oil is warm at the time. Well, that was unsuccessful. So let's try it with the key off and see if that makes a difference. No. So we may have to take it out, and it does seem to be just a couple of screws, 1, 2, probably a couple up here somewhere as well. And see if we can take the cluster along to that fella, Lionel I think his name is. See if he can help, because we're certainly not having much success with this. Well, that was unsuccessful. So for now, let's do two things. One is to start the water running out, and then the second is to get that label, and we'll stick that on the firewall with the kilometres for when it was done, which I think was about 616,000. So let's just do that. There's the bung. What I have noticed is an oil spot right there. So something's dripping from up here, and it looks to me as if it's around the main seal or something around the sump. So that might be one to investigate. But let's get this bung out for now.
Just while that drains, let's grab that label and we'll stick it up on the firewall. What I have noticed is there's no caps on these air conditioning fillers, so I wonder if they were ever there or whether they went missing during that fill. So we'll maybe contact them and see if we can get a couple to stick on there. There's a couple of things to do. One is to replace the air filter, and then the other is to replace the fuel filter. So let's just do the air filter first. And there's one other thing that I wanted to check, and that is that inside here on the old one was this, which is some kind of wind baffle, I suppose. As the air travels, it spins it. Exactly what purpose it serves, I don't know, but let's see if there is one in here, and if not, we can fit this. Take this off as easy as you know. It's just that one single nut on the top. 3 clips. Which lifts off. We will take this off here. And there is none. There isn't one of these. So let's fit this in and assume that when it goes in, we want the air to spin like so. So let's fit it. That ought to do us. Old filter out. New filter in. There we go. Now for the fuel filter, there are 2 hoses, one here, which we need to disconnect. I note that some have 2 filters. This only has the one. I'm not sure what the second one actually does in that case, but let's take these 2 hoses off. Let's see if we can just push this hose down, being prepared to end up with spilling some diesel. Now, while it is possible to fit the new one while it's in, it's probably easier to take it out. There's really only these 2 bolts here, and the whole thing comes out. Now this, let's pour that diesel out. This comes off. So let's empty this out. We'll unclip this for a start. Let's do that. And then this whole thing comes out complete with that clip which we've just taken off. Let's just make sure we've got rid of all of the diesel. But a trick that you can do is to reverse this, put it on here, upside down, and I don't know how hard it is to get that bottom sensor off, but if the filter itself is difficult to get off, that will hold it on. So that sensor looks to be good and stuck. Get yourself some multi-grips. Avoid crushing it. Because this has to go back on the the new one. So that's pretty tight, so let's go and grab ourselves a filter tool. And wisely we have one. Now this is just a super cheap tool, Tool Pro, but it helps us to get a grip that we can't normally have with our hands. And you can see it's pretty tight. So we're lucky we've got this tool. So that trick of bolting it there is a good one, given that this is very tough to take off, and without being able to hold it firm, there is no way I would have been able to do this. I suppose you could use a vise, but not everyone always has one of those to hand. Now, we'll put the new one straight on. So this is a genuine Toyota part, and you'll note that it actually has these here at the top, which should make it a bit easier to get off next time. Just take a little diesel, rub it around the seal just to make it slide on a little better. Screw it on. Now only do it hand tight. Now we've got to put that sensor back in, and the new filter comes complete with an O-ring. So see this here, this old O-ring. Take that off and discard. Put the new O-ring on. Once again, make sure you give it a bit of a damp down with some diesel. Pop that in. Tighten that back up. Hand tight is fine. We can flip this back over. So don't forget that trick, because it's a good one, of flipping it over, which then enables you to get to the filter easily. And then don't forget to hook up the hoses. But what I'll do is I'll put on this side first, so that's the one nearest to you, or nearest to the front of the car. And then we'll pump, because see this little thing on the top here, this is the pump, which enables you to prime it. And if we pump here, we should see fuel coming back up from the other hose. So all we're doing is pushing up and down on it. It'll take a while. And there we go. So we can now put this back on. That should restart straight away. So did you get all that? Hose is off, the sensor disconnected. Take the filter housing off, flip it over, take off the sensor, take off the filter, put the new filter on, put the new sensor back on, replacing the O-ring, put it all back on, reconnect the hoses and pump. Now I only connected this hose and left this one off while I pumped, and then once I could see fuel coming out of here, I knew then that I'd refilled the filter housing and I could connect that. This should just start and pump normally. Let's try. Not only has it started, the timing light's gone off. I'm not sure how to explain that. Maybe it's just magic. One last thing left to do, and that is to retighten these. Don't forget that we didn't do that, we just slipped them in by hand. Torque setting by micrometer. Now don't forget, of course, we haven't yet topped it up with the coolant, so that's going to be our last job and probably the final one we do today. We won't do the oil change. For now we'll just top that up. We will just check the oil level though. Oil level is low, and so look, why don't we just go ahead and do that? It won't take too long. We've just got to find a container to drain the oil into, and then we'll just let that drip dry. While that's happening, we can also then well, the problem is that we're not level, so look, let's not do it immediately. Let's wait until we level up the car, because at the moment I don't want a whole bunch of oil to be sitting in the front of the sump while I drain it. So let's just wait and do that next time. Gee, this is the Keystone Cops. Well, it wouldn't be easier just to put it straight in. Yeah, it's full to the brim, but there's no knowing just how much might still be trapped behind an air pocket. So let's put the cap back on and we go for a ride. Now this is remarkable because, like I said, what's happened here is the timing light's gone off. And while it was on before and stayed on the moment we changed that filter, particularly the fuel filter, I think. Or alternatively, it just took a little while for it to kind of register, I don't know. But it's off and it's stayed off. Let's go for a ride and we'll warm her up to normal operating temperature. By then it should have blown out any bubbles and we can top it back up. We've still got a couple of litres left of the coolant, and we might even poke it back up on the hill here because there's a bit of a slope here where I'm parked, pointing upwards, and then we can drain the oil, change the filter, and job complete. We might look for a better funnel, because the last one doesn't really matter if you splash a little coolant. I don't want to be splashing a little oil all over the engine. She's driving very nicely. Timing light's still off, and temperature is about where it normally is, so we can drain the oil. See, with the bung right at the back of the sump, we didn't really want to drain it when it was pointing downhill, but this is good while it's pointing uphill. Oh, 14 perhaps. I like it. So now this is the next job, is to pull this filter off. Let's see how we go. So we've loosened it a bit. It's pretty hot, but we can spit it off. We've chucked a rag under there. We're going to lose a bit of oil, but that's just the way it goes, unfortunately. Well, I shouldn't say lose, but spill. That's very hot. And I grab a glove. We drained out, I don't know how big that is, but let's say 10 or 12 litres, so probably 8 or 9 litres. I think it takes about 10 or 11, so there obviously would have been some still in that filter, but so it was down low, so that's probably, you know, close to 9 litres I suppose there. So we put the bung back in, we put the filter back on, taking care of course obviously to wipe a smear of oil onto the seal of the O-ring and tighten that back up by hand to make sure that we don't over tighten. We've that's full just to there, so that's fine. So we've still got some coolant left over. We'll check it again soon. Now we've got to put this in. That's most of it. Let's check the oil level. That's actually showing pretty close to full. Obviously this is leaning backwards, so let's tip the rest in. There's not very much. This V8 vegetable juice container is perfect because it actually screws in, believe it or not, so it stays there. It's quite rigidly held. You got to keep yourself hydrated. Well, that's been a reasonable effort today. We drained and filled up the water, and we drained and filled up the oil, replaced the oil filter, and we replaced the fuel filter. So that's pretty well that job complete. That doesn't mean everything's done, because obviously we've still got it in the back there, a grill which needs painting along with those letters that needs to go back on, and the bull bar. And I've been thinking about the bull bar because it's not a winch compatible bull bar, so I wonder whether I just go ahead and weld that bar back into it, the one that I cut out, as you'll recall if you saw that video about teaching myself welding, and look around for a winch compatible bull bar for the 1HZ 75 series, because I've already got the winch, you know, so it's just a matter of getting the bull bar and I can fit it. So while it's off, just put the replacement one on rather than put the old one on, take it off to put the replacement one on. So I think that makes sense. Anyway, that's it for this video, and thanks so much for watching. There'll be more to go, as well as don't forget to check out the one on the BMW, which I just uploaded the other day, and I'm working on another one for another country drive, so talk to you soon.